Hello and welcome to Kenzo Code Play. Today's video will be developing a React To-Do app that not only looks great but also utilizes Firebase for seamless authentication and Firestore to manage our to-dos. I've already created an empty server file for our Node.js API, and together we'll be developing it from the ground up. We'll also work on integrating this API with our React front end and ensuring everything runs smoothly. So whether you are a beginner or looking to refine your skills, this project will give you valuable insight into full stack development with React and Firebase. So let's get started. To start things off, we need to import Express. And then we'll also import a cause. And finally, we'll get the admin, which is Firebase admin. And then since we are using a service account, I'll be calling that as well. And then we have to now initialize our app. To do that, we'll call credential. And then give it the service account. Let me just clean this up. And then obviously now we need to call our database or initialize our database. Just call it DB. Firestore. And then now we have to call Express. App. And we'll say app.use. We'll use cause. Express.json. Now that is done, what we need to do now is now specify our routes. So the API will have like, I think 4 routes. So we'll have, first of all, let's maybe put some documentation there. Getting all to-dos, so that what this route will do is it will get all to-dos, and then we'll get well, create a single to-do. But to do that, I think we'll use the user ID, since we will be using authentication after all. And then we'll update you specific to do with the user ID. And then finally, we will delete it to do a specific to do. For a specific user. And then let's specify the port. So we need to specify what port it will be running on. Default 5000. And then we'll tell the app to listen at port and then we'll just console.log server perfect. I think if we run the app, it will run, but since we haven't implemented any of these routes as of yet, so it won't do anything. So the API will just be running on the port, but will not be doing anything. So maybe let's implement the route to get all to-dos for now, and let's work from there. So for this one, we'll say app.get. So since it's a get, and then we'll specify the route API to-dos, and then we'll want the user ID, and then we'll call a sync require response, request and response. Now we implement the route in here. So we can now use parameters to get the user ID from the route itself. So when you are calling the API, obviously you'll say, maybe if you are running it on localhost, you'll say localhost and then specify the port, and then slash API slash to-dos, and then slash the user ID. So now we can index the URL itself and get the user ID from the URL itself. So let's do that. We'll use a request params, so parameters. This will then give us the user ID from the URL itself. And then now we need to call Firebase to get the specific collection, and then also map the collection and get the specific to-dos that match the user ID. So let's do that. To do that, we'll nest it in a try and catch. So any errors will display, or rather we will respond with that specific error. We'll give it a status. What status is it? 500, I think. And then the JSON, just make sure it's a JSON, and then error, that will be the body or the response rather. This will be the message, fail to fetch to-dos. Just a simple message will do for any errors, and then obviously it will also give us the error that was encountered. And then now the implementation of fetching the specific data from, or specific to-dos from the Firestore itself. To do that, we need just snapshot. And then obviously, since it's a request, we need to await the request, and then db.collection. So we'll index a specific collection. So all our collection will only have one collection, and then that collection will have different documents on Firestore. So we'll only have one collection that's named to-dos, and then that collection will have different documents, like I said, and then each document will have a specific entry that has like user ID that we can then use to check if the specific user that requested the to-dos is the document old. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Where user ID is equal to user ID dot get. So what this will do is it will say, give me the collection of to-dos where the document contains the user ID, or where the document's entry user ID is equal to user ID, and then it will get all of them. And then now we need to make or map it or convert it into a list. To-do list, so we'll call that snapshot, and then docs. So those are all the documents dot map, and then we'll say doc is equal ID say the document.dart. Just about it. Now we have the to-do list. Now once we get the to-do list, we can then respond to the request with the status code of 200. That's okay. And then we now have to just convert our to-do list to a JSON file and then feed it back to the request, or the front end rather. So basically that's us getting all of the to-dos. Yeah. Now let's implement the logic for creating a post. So or posting rather a new to-do. So since we are posting, we'll be using the post method, and then the API, we'll call the API URL, specify it rather, API to-dos, and then it's just about it. No no, for this logic, I don't think there's really a need for us to implement the user ID in the URL itself. I mean, obviously, even for this one, we'll be getting the user ID as a parameter, so it will be in the body, I'm assuming. And then, no, it will be in the parameter itself. And then for the post, we'll just be getting it from the body itself. So the request should always have the user ID in the body. And then what else could we get? We obviously could get the text as well. So the to-do text. So let's implement that async again, and then request and response. So since we will be getting almost everything from the body itself, we'll just be indexing from the body. So the text, we'll want the text from the body, the to-do text, and the user ID from the body. And we'll just say request of body. So we're gonna be using the same logic of trying and catching, and yeah. Try to catch error. And then obviously if there is an error, what we want to do is we want to say response dot, let's rather just copy this and paste this here, because it's the same logic. The only thing we're going to be changing is the error message itself. So instead of failed to fetch, we'll be saying failed to create to do. Now we create the document using the user ID and the text as well. And then we'll also have something else called let's just do it first. Constant document reference is equal to await database.collection, and then we want the to-dos collection, and we want to add a document there, and the document will have the following entries. It will have text, it will have completed, is equal to false, since obviously you just created the to do, so it automatically becomes false. So this is what I wanted to mention first. So obviously we want to check if the to do is completed or not. So we, on the front end, you can just mark it as complete or mark it as incomplete. And then we want the user ID as well, since for our, when we fetch all the to-dos, we use user ID to index, or rather fetch the specific documents. We want the user ID, just about it. And then once that's done, we want to give out the status of 200 again. And then for this one, we'll just give out the JSON, and then return the ID, obviously. This will be the document ID. Document.reference.id. And then we want to give out the text and then complete it as well. I think that's just about it. But then, now that I think about it, what happens if the user does not give out a text? So we need to handle that. Obviously, we can't just create empty to-dos. That would not make any sense. So let's maybe handle that logic for when the user does not give out any ID. If any text, rather, if text or user ID, so if any of those are not there, any of those are not specified, then what we want to is to return response dot status 400, and then we want to give it a JSON, return it as a JSON. Error. To do text and user ID required. Perfect. I think that's the implementation for creating a single user ID or single to-do item. And then now we need to implement the logic for updating a specific ID. So we know a specific ID, what it has the text, the completed is false, and the user ID. Obviously for the user ID, we don't want to change anything there. We can't take a specific to-do and give it to a certain user. but what we want to change is the completed or not, and then maybe at a later stage you can then change the text, or I don't know. But for this part of the video, we're just going to be changing the completed. So instead of post, we'll be using put, since the to-do already exists. So we'll be putting in, that's the method, and then the URL will be to-do, or API rather, to-dos. And then for this one, we'll just take in the ID. So the ID will be, or the ID will be taking in the ID as a URL parameter, and the ID will be the document ID or the to-do ID. Just put it as ID, and then sync again, request, response. We want to fetch all of these. First of all, let's fetch the ID. From the parameters, request.param. And then we also want to fetch the completed and user ID from the body, so that we make sure we are working with the correct to do. Same logic again, try catch. Just take this catch, save us a bit of time. Let's make sure it's a specific to do here, and then fail to update to do. In the try, what we firstly want to do is fetch the collection, obviously, and then after fetching the collection, we want to get the documents, or the document rather, and then using the specific document ID, and then we want to return, or rather we want to update it and then return any responses. Let's do that. To do document is equal to database.collection to-dos collection, and then the document will give it the ID that we indexed from the parameters. And then now that we have the specific document we are looking for, we want to get the snapshot. It's just about it. And now we just update it. We give it the, or we just update the completed rather. then we return the response. Status will be 200. We want to give it the JSON, and then what we want to return is the ID and completed. Perfect. So we are updating the document without using the snapshot or the user ID. The reason we define them or call them is because what we want to do is implement the logic when the user ID, or the user that's trying to update the specific, just notice something, the user that's trying to update the specific to do is not the correct user. So if maybe there's a mistake in the user ID, then we want to make sure that we don't just let anyone update any to-dos if they don't have the specific user ID. So we want to handle that condition first before we give out this response. So what we do is we say if the document.snapshot exists, we firstly want to make sure it exists, or if the document.snapshot data user ID is not equal to the user ID that we got. If the snapshot does not exist, or if the user ID is not equal to the user ID that we were provided, then we wanna return a response of what error code is unauthorized. Let me just quickly search that. (403). So response.request, response.status number 403, and then we want to give it a JSON, make sure it's a JSON, and then it's an error unauthorized to update this to do that to do. So we want to let the user know that they are unauthorized to update their current to do. Maybe the to do does not exist, or maybe they are not the correct user. So obviously that would handle two possibilities at the same time. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to handle the delete. So if a user wants to delete a specific to do, so to do that, we are gonna use the delete method, and then API to do's, and then what we want is the document ID as well, same as updating or putting, and then async request response, and then I'm sure you are used to what we do right now. We're gonna be doing the try and catch. First of all, let's just make sure we have that. We don't want errors breaking our code at any point. So we'd rather give out the error code, the error back to the front end, so that the front end knows that there's something wrong. Fail to delete instead of date. And then how we're going to be implementing this is almost the same way, but for this one we won't be getting any parameters of, or rather we won't be getting any completed, because we don't necessarily need to know whether the to-do is completed or not. If the user wants to delete it, it doesn't really matter whether the to-do is complete or not. So first of all, we'll start with the user ID again, or the ID rather, request.parameters. And then we'll take the user ID from the body. Request.body. Think that's just about all the values that we need. Sorry. And then now we need to implement the actual deletion of the to-do. So it's just about the same thing, same logic as the delete, but instead of updating, we'll be deleting. So I don't like copying and pasting. Let's constant to do document is equal to database dot collection, and then we want to specify the to-dos collection, and then document, we'll give it the ID that we just fetched from the parameters. With this, now we can delete the document itself. So you can say await to do document delete. We don't need to give it any parameters, and then once that's done, we can give out the response, and then of the status code 200, obviously it's okay, and then JSON will be just a message rather, because obviously now that the document does not exist, we don't need to return the document itself or anything that's updated. Message we want to say to do successfully, or deleted successfully, rather than successfully deleted. I don't know what the difference is, but deleted successfully makes more sense. And then what we want to do now is implement almost the same, exactly the same logic as in here. We want to implement the same logic as in here. So we want to make sure that we are not deleting any document that does not exist, or we are not deleting a document if the user ID or the user is not the correct user for that specific document. And to do that, we need the snapshot. Is equal to await to do dot get. So we want to give out almost the same response. It's unauthorized again, but unauthorized to delete instead of update. And I think that's just about it for our server or the API itself. So to start our API, we will be running npm run dev in our terminal, and then the API will be running in development mode. So if we want to make any changes, the changes will instantly be loaded or saved in the server, and we won't have to constantly restart the server. And then for our front end, for now, I just have created these files, these 3 files, which is, we have a directory for components that has the to-do item, which will be our single to-do item, and the to-do list will be our main list that contains all the to-dos. And then we have this firebase.js file, which will be our Firebase configuration. It will be calling all our configurations from Firebase. And then the app .js, the main app file, will mainly be implementing the authentication, so sign in and sign out, and then redirecting if the user is signed in, and then if the user is signed out, also just displaying the sign in that we want. So let me just show you. So this is just what we have at the current moment, and I'm thinking that we start with the sign in and sign out, so that we at least have authentication complete. And to do that, we have to implement the configuration first, so that we can import it and use it in the app.js. So to start off things, we need to import the initialize app from the Firebase and all of that. I think for now I'm just going to let or rather, let me just import it. Initialize app, and we want to import it from Firebase. And then what we also want to import is, man, what the hell, what's going on here? Seem to be clumsy today. Get authentication. We wanna import Google authentication provider. So I'll be using Google authentication. You can either use email, Facebook, and all of those other different authentications, or you can use Google as well. And then we want to import sign in with pop-up. And then we want to import sign out. And then all of these will be coming from Firebase authentication. And then obviously now we want to define our configuration file, Firebase config. This is where you will be putting in things like the API key, authentication admin, API ID, and all of that. Those you can get from Firebase itself. and then let me just slot in mine. Let me just copy from Firebase and let me just slot in mine. Obviously, and then we'll be defining our app and authentication and provider, initialize app, and then what we want to give it is the Firebase configuration, and then we want to initialize the authentication, and then we want to give it get authentication, then app there, and then we want to initialize our provider, and then it will be a new Google authentication provider. And then with all of those, we want to export them now. So export authentication, export provider, export sign in with pop-up, export sign in, sign out. And then that's just about it for our configuration file. Now that we have our configuration file done, now we can implement the logic for signing in and signing out. To do that, we now need to go to app. So first of all, I think we need to have the sign in button first of all, and then we also just want to display the to-do app, this h2, only when the user is signed in. So when the user is signed in, we want to display this, and then maybe also a sign out button as well, and then maybe we can also display who's signed in, maybe signed in as, and then get the name from the user itself or the email. So to do that, I am firstly gonna implement sort of like a condition to check if the user is signed in or not. If the user is signed in, we want to display this. If the user is not signed in, we want to then display the sign in with Google button, and then welcome to do app and all of that. So obviously this is just a placeholder. We'll be calling the to-do list that will be displaying the to-do list itself. So first of all, we need to define the user variable. User state null. So now that we know that when the user is not defined or when the user is not set, it will just be equal to null, we can use that to create some sort of like a condition and choose what we render at what time. So if not user, so if it's not the user, this is what we want to render. And then we'll just let's just start off with welcome first. H2 welcome to the to-do app. Just capitalize this, clean this up. So basically when the user is not signed in, we want to display this, and then obviously then display the button, which will be our sign in button. And then the button will just say sign in with Google. And then for the button itself, I'm thinking obviously we need to handle the on click and all of that. For now, let's just handle the class name, and then we'll say authentication button. And then obviously if the user is signed in, we want to do this. I'm missing something here. I'm not sure as of yet what I'm missing. I think yeah, I'm missing a main container. So we'll just call it authentication container. And I'm assuming this will be universal for the sign in and the sign out. I'm not so sure as of yet, but let's just implement the sign out. So when the user is logged in, what we want to do is then obviously display this, which is the to-do app, which is the to-do app itself, or the to-do list. And then for the main authentication or the sign out, I'm not going to define it, or I'm not going to give it a class name. Rather, I'm just going to define an empty container. So when the user is signed in, we want to display this container, which will have the to-do app and hopefully a sign out button. For the sign out, I'm gonna put it in a head. And then we'll just say app header, which will be our class name. And then for the header, we'll have a h2 tag, which will say which will just greet the user. This will just greet the user. Hello. Let's put a comma there. And then we wanna display the username. We'll slot that in later on once we have, or rather since we know that we should be using the user dot display name. This will take the user's name, registered name, and then display it there. And then we'll also have a button here, which will just be our sign out button. And for the button, we'll just say sign out. Class name for this button will be also authentication use button. And then we'll also have a sign out so that we give it a different color, but the styling will be the same as the sign in button. Let's just check what we have for now. So for now, you see it's displaying the welcome to the to-do app and the sign in with Google. And then obviously when I click this, it will give me a pop-up, but obviously for now you guys won't be seeing the pop-up Oh, it's not giving me the pop-up as of yet because we did not implement the on click. So on click for the button, what we want to do is call the handler sign in, which we have not implemented as of yet. So now we need to handle sign in. How we do that is we just call the sign in from the Firebase configuration and give it the authentication and the provider, and then we set the user to the signed in user. If there's an error, we catch the error. So constant handle sign in, and then sign in with pop-up. We give it authentication, we give it provider, then, but we want to clean this up. Then what we want to do is get the results, or rather result, and then we want to use that result to set the user. Set user result dot user. That is done, and then if that doesn't work out, we want to catch any errors. We want to get the error, and then we just want to console.log the error, or console error. This will display the error dot error during sign in, and then maybe let's display the error rather. If I can spell correct. Let's try the sign in. So it says sign in with pop-up was not found, authentic possible exports, blah 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 blah. So the issue is that it's no, shouldn't be any issues. Don't know. So I think the issue is that obviously I didn't install the Firebase library. So let me install the Firebase library first, and then we'll get back to it. So now I have the dependent libraries installed, all of them. So Axios and Firebase as well. So now when I click on the sign in with Google, it gives me the pop-up, and then I can then choose my email, which you cannot see at the moment. So as you can see now, it's displaying hello Kenny M, and then it has the sign out, but the sign out logic is not implemented as of yet. So let's handle the sign out logic, and then let's also handle the persistence, so we can persist the use. As you can see, if I reload now, it logs me out. Let's handle the sign out and then also the persistence, so that the user persists. For the sign out, the on click, we want to handle sign out, and then we want to implement that one as well. To do that, we'll just be calling the sign out and then giving it the authentication. And then what we want to do is then set the user to null, guys. Set user to null. So we now that then this condition will not be true, meaning it will now display the sign in with Google once we press the sign out button. And then obviously we want to catch any errors. Let's do that. I'm just going to copy and paste this, and then error during sign out. It's just the only thing we're going to change there. And then let's see if this works. And then so now I have signed in. When I press the sign out, it signs me out and brings me back to this. So let's sign in and then implement the persistence so that it persists even when the user reloads the page. It doesn't sign them out, because I find that a bit annoying that I have to constantly sign in after reloading the page. So to do that, we'll call the use effect. And then what we want to do is unsubscribe the user. So authentication dot on authentication state changed authenticate user is equal to, we want to take that authenticated user. If authenticated user, then we want to set user to the authenticated user. So basically what we're just doing is we're constantly checking if the user is subscribed or authenticated or not. If they are authenticated, we just want to constantly set them to the authenticated user. Else, if they are not authenticated, we can set user to null. And then the user is signed out. I always do the same thing. It's not Python. Always. Now we want to clean up the list now to like unmounted. So what we're going to do now is, after all of that, we are going to return unsubscribe. That's just it. So now the page should be persistent. You see, as you can see, try to sign me out, but it realized that I'm already signed in, and it took me back to the signed in page, or rather the to-do app itself. But now if I press the sign out and reload, it will notice that I'm signed out, and I'd have to sign in back again. And then that has signed me in. So maybe let's just implement the styling for the sign in and the sign out very quickly, and then move on to the to-do app itself. For the styling, we are going to start with the authentication container. So if you remember correctly, this is the authentication container. So the main sign-in page with the sign out button. Let me just make sure. Yes, it's authentication container. What we want to do with it is just flex it, really just center it actually to the page, and then flex direction. We want a column, make sure we're displaying downwards, and then justify it to the center, and then obviously align it to the center, or align its items to the center. And then we just want to set the height to the maximum width of the screen so that it fills the screen. So view height. And then we also have, if you remember correctly, we also have the authentication button, which is universal to the sign out and the sign in buttons. So we want to now style that. Just give it a background color for now. Let me see what color I can get. Let me quickly get the color. There we go. And then we just wanna, that's the background color. We wanna make sure that the font color is white. And then the font size is like 16 pixels. Padding, so that there's a little bit of space on the top, 12 pixels at the bottom, 20, or on the sides 20 pixels. So top and bottom 12, sides 20, border, we don't want no border. And then border radius, we just wanna give it a border radius of 5 pixels. And then after body radius, we're just gonna make sure that the cursor is a pointer when you hover over it. Margin, we wanna give it 10 pixels, and then we wanna give it a width of 200 pixels. And then text align center. We want to align even that greeting or the welcome part. And then I think we are gonna transition background color. And then 0.3 seconds ease. And then on hover, we wanna change the background color to something a bit lighter, or a bit darker rather, to this. It's just check it out real quickly. So the sign in is fine. You know that the sign in is okay. Let's now deal with the sign out. See, as you can see, the sign out is also the same, the button is there and all of that. Now what we want to do is maybe give it a different color. Let me get a color real quickly. And then authentication dot sign out. And then background color, just want to change the background color of the authentication button. Obviously it keeps the same styling as a cursor, pointer and all of that, but now we want to change the on hover. Let me get the different color, it's the darker shade. Perfect. Now that is out of the way, let's deal with the header. If you remember correctly, the sign out is in the header, so it's in the header. So maybe we can deal with the app header itself, and then see how far we get with that. Maybe style it a bit also using the same logic, almost the same logic. App header, display, flex, and then justify, center, align center, and then what we want is a different background color. Let me get a background color, grayish one. And then padding, same padding, 10 pixels on top left and top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. And then color, we just want to give it a white. And then we want to implement the app header, or rather style the app header the h2, which is the greeting or the name. So we just want to give it a margin of 0. And then app container, authentication container, just gonna give it a smaller margin at the bottom. Give it a tiny margin at the bottom so there's a bit of space. For the h2, $20 pixels. Perfect. Now as you can see, this whole thing now has a sign out and all of that, gray background and all of that. Now let's implement the main thing, which is the to-do list. For the to-do list, it's a bit of a obviously we need to take in the input. So take in the input of the to-do, maybe the text or the text, and then we also need to have a button to post or create the to-do, and we also have to display the to-do list itself. The to-do list, when we're displaying it, it will either display loading or it will display all the to-dos for that current user, and it will call the to-do item. So let's do that. First of all, we need to define it. Let me just give myself some space. So this one, it will take in a parameter. We want to take in the user so that we know who the user is, and we also can fetch all their to-dos or create or delete or update or any of those other things. And then we want to also set maybe let's return. For now, let's just return and the input and the to-do container itself. Div class name to-do container, and then we also want to have the container for the input. Class name to do input container. Let me just check something. To do app container, and for that we'll just put in the input. And then type is text. Placeholder will be add a new to-do, and then the value will be new to-do, even though we haven't defined it as of yet. And then on change, we will take that and set new to do to the eval. It'll target that value, and then the class name finally will be to do input. Let's define the new to do and the set to do. Set new to do, use state. I'll just give it an empty string for now, and I think while we at it, let's define all the to-dos, which will be a list. To-dos, set to-dos, use state, and it will just be an empty list. And we will also define the loading or not, so that's a boolean to see if we are loading or not. So that will happen, or that will be true if we are still fetching the data from the API, or while we wait for the response from the API. This will be true, otherwise it will always be false. And then what am I doing wrong here? I'm not so sure as of yet. On change, let me just redo all of this. take that and then set it to the new to do, and then e.target.value. Let's just visualize all of this. I don't think, oh, we are not calling it as of yet. And then the declaration statement expected, what's that? Actually, I mixed the brackets. And then let's export default to-do list. And then let's call it on our app. Instead of calling this, let's call the to-do list. TD list. Right. Let's visualize it now. So now we have the input. We're just missing the button and all of that. Let's slot in the button. So the button will be just as simple. And it will say add to do. There we go, we have our button now, and then we just need to define the class name, add button, and then we have to also give it, or rather handle the on click, and then we'll just say add to do. Let's define that. Let us define the add to do now. So to do that, we'll have to call the API now. Sync. So we wait for all of that, and then let's handle this quickly. New to do trim. And then let's do the try and catch and error handling. Console.error. Perfect. Now let's implement the try. So we await. Yes. Then we post. Remember, the heading is handled with the post on the API side. HTTP. For now, we're just running it on localhost. Remember, the port number for the API is 5000, and then I think it's API todos or slash todos. That's just about it. And then what we want to do now is give it the body, which is the text, I think, and the new to do. give it the user ID, which will be user.uid. And then once that's done, we'll set the to do. So just clear the to do, set new to do to nothing, and then fetch to do's. Now we need to implement the fetch to do's because we haven't implemented that as of yet. So obviously after setting it, we need to refresh our to do's, make sure that they now contain the new to do's, or yeah, they now contain the new to do's. So just about refreshing. Now let's implement the fetch to do's logic. I think we should have started with it. Fetch to do's. No, I'm missing something. We'll just add this here. And then now we are going to be using the set loading. So we want it to load once we start fetching the to-dos, and then we want the try catch. Let me just copy this, save us a bit of time. Error fetching to-dos. And then now we just wanna define our new to-dos, or response is equal to await get, and then we provide it with the URL.
Hello, Kenny. The time is 2:50 p.m. Currently in.
Sorry about that. After the to-dos for the API, we need to now provide it with the user's ID. In the URL. And then now we'll take the response and then set the data to to-dos. Not seeing any errors as of yet. I don't know why it's saying I must sign in. Oh, I was in a hurry there. Record. Let's try and add it to do. It's not doing anything as of yet. Adding to do cannot read properties of undefined UID. Okay, I know why. So in our app, when we call in the to-do list, we need to provide it with the user. user is equal to user. Let's try that again. Not found. So that must be something with the API or the URL. Let's just make sure our URL is correct. I'm not seeing anything wrong here. And then should be here. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything wrong either. Anyways, I'll debug that and I'll show you guys the error. So the main issue that I've noticed is the fact that, well, there are 2 points. I had a dot here, and on the front end I didn't have that, and then also it was, the route was to do, not to do's. So now that I've sorted that out, it works because if I show you, I have this one document which is record video, which is the to do, and then if I add another one, stop making mistakes, and then if I add that to do, obviously now it doesn't load. Well, it does load, but it doesn't display the current what is it, all of the to do's as of yet. But if you see now, we have the stop making mistakes to do added there as well. So I'm glad I spotted that before anything else. Now that is out of the way, I think I am going to continue. We're almost done, almost. Just, I think for now, let's implement the to do item. So to do that, obviously we need to define our to do. And this is just going to be a pretty straightforward item. So the to do will take in, obviously it will take in the to do itself, and then it will take in toggle complete, and it will also take in delete to do. So these are the buttons that we need. So for these ones, we firstly need to define them in here, and I'm just gonna define them with placeholders. So let's do that. I'm just gonna define them with placeholders for now. Toggle complete, rather async, and then that, we'll give it some values later on, but for now we're just gonna leave it blank. And then we also want to define the delete complete. Delete to do also will be async. I think it might also take in some things, but for now we're just gonna leave it empty. And then obviously when we call the to do item, we'll then give it these two functions or whatnot. And then the to do item, this is how it's going to look. We just want to return a list item. So the list item will give it a class name of we'll give it a class name of to do item. Then we want to toggle if it's complete or not complete. So to do that, we will say if it's complete, to do dot complete. If it is complete, we want to give it the completed class name. Else we just want to not give it any other class name other than the to do item class name. And then obviously we need the text to display the text, and then we also need to display the two buttons. So for the text, I think we're just going to use span, and then we'll just call that to do. To do no text. So we just want to take in the text, and then we want to display the buttons, the two different buttons, the complete or either undo or the delete button. And then obviously they're going to have different class names as well. So button, and then for this one we want to either display complete or undo. So to do that, we're just gonna have to do dot complete. If that is true, then we want to display undo, obviously with the capital letter. Otherwise, if it's not complete, then we want to display complete. So if you click the button, it will toggle either or complete or undo. So it will set the completed to either true or false on the Firebase or Firestore. And then the on click, we want to do this. So we will call toggle complete, and then for toggle complete we will give it to do dot id, which is the id for the to do, and then we'll give it the to do dot complete, completed. And then the function itself should toggle in between. So if it's false, it will set it to true. If it's true, it will set it to false. And then the class name, we will just set it to change button, and then the other button we need is the delete button. So on click, or rather let's just put in the delete first, and then on click we want to call it that delete dot to do delete to do, and what we want to give it is just the to do.id, and then the class name will be the delete button, just like that. And for that, I think we are done with the to do item. All we need to do is export it, or rather, and also import React, because we need to do that. Export default to do item, and then now we can call it in here. And then obviously, now that we are taking in those parameters for the to do complete and the to delete to do, we have to also count for them in here. So for the delete to do, it will just be the ID, and then for this one it will be the ID plus the completed. So ID and completed, and then what we have to do now is obviously display the to do item. For now the buttons won't do anything, and then we just want to display them and see if it's doing the right thing. So if what we want to firstly do is check if it's loading. If it's loading, what we want to do is display the p tag, and just say loading, and then if it's not loading, we want to then display an ordered list. We want to display an ordered list. The ordered list will just take in just display it as a map, todos.map, and then how we want to do that is we want to take the to do, so that's each to do, and we want to call the to do item with that. And then we'll just give it the key, will be the to do ID, and then the to do will be just to do, and then the toggle complete will be toggle complete, and then the delete to do will be the delete to do. I think that's just all. We need to give it class names now, and to-do list. Let's see if it's doing the things. So from now onwards it should be displaying the one to do item that we have. It's not doing the things. Let's add another to do. Let's add another to do. What can I call it? Sleep, because I haven't slept in a while now. That we have that, let's see if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So clearly, even that new other to do has been added. We have the record video, we have the sleep, but it's not displaying either one of them. So I'm assuming there's a problem with our condition here. So I'm sure you saw that it does display loading, but it never displays the ordered list. I'm not sure if there's something in the console that can give us an idea, but I'm assuming that this does set to true, but it never sets back to false, which can be a problem. Yes, set loading, and then after all of that has been done, whether we are getting an error or what, we want to set it back to false. Still not displaying. It should display by just reloading, but let's try and do something else. Go shopping, get a better mic. Loading, there we go. Finally it's doing what it's supposed to do. And then what I do not understand is the fact that even after like loading for the first time, it should display all of the to-dos, or rather before, it should display all of the to-dos, but it's not doing that. So I am thinking, since it does refresh the it refreshes only when it adds a to do, and then I need to find out, so even after deleting we need to do that, even after toggle complete we need to do that. Oh, and also we need to have a use effect just to constantly check, or rather fetch the to-dos. Fetch to-dos, and then we just wanna take in user. I just wanna take in user, and then now it should be loading. Even after a brief reload, it should be taking all the, yes, perfect. Now that's out of the way. As you can probably see that I am clicking these buttons but nothing happens. So what I am going to do is I am going to implement the logic for these now. We know that the toggle complete should take in the ID, and it should take in the complete as well. So but as the other one, as the add to do, we are just gonna put a catch, try and catch here. And then I'm just gonna copy this, error handling, and then we'll say error toggle incomplete. Error toggle incomplete, and then that should do something when we try to toggle complete, and if we encounter any errors. And then let's copy the URL, and then for this one we are going to await put, or is it update? I think it's put, and then we're just gonna put in this new URL, and then we'll give it the user ID. We'll just give it the ID. Because we are getting the ID as a parameter as it is, we'll just give it the ID, and then what else can we do? I think that's just about it. And then in the await, what we want to give it the completed in the body. So completed is equal to the opposite. So whatever we get, we want to give it the total opposite. And then user ID will be the user ID. I mean, we can always, the ID there will be the UID. So this ID, this ID will be the to-do ID instead of the user ID, and then this one will be the user ID itself. And then once we've done that, we'll just fetch the to-dos just to refresh the thing again. Once we've done that, now we can implement the delete. Let's see if it works first of all, and if it does work, we'll know that we're okay. So we have an error. So it clearly is not working as intended. We just find out. I think the only issue, it might be this, since it's completed, not complete. And let me try and reload and see what happens. Should be displaying, unless if I'm doing the same thing on other ones. Yeah. So that's the only other issue, and as well as here, because I'm missing that as well. So as you can see, once I've changed this one specific part, it now recognizes that it's complete or if it's not complete. So that was the main thing. Now we are going to implement the delete. We just copy this, try and catch real quick, and then we can work on from that. So we know we are gonna wait and all of that, but here we are gonna say deleting to do. And then after deleting to do, what do? We need to give it I think the URL is just about the same. Let me just quickly check on the API. I think it's just about the same. And the only difference, so we take this, let me just double check again on the API. Is the delete? Where's the delete? So it's API to dos and then the ID. Obviously that's the to do ID, and then we'll give it the user ID and the body itself. So we'll just give it the user ID, but instead of it needs to be in data, I think. No, I think it's fine like that. Let's try it out. And then here is just the ID and then the user ID, and then instead of put we delete. Okay, right, let's try it out. Let's delete the sleep part because team no sleep, guys. Clearly it doesn't work out. Let's put all of this in data. Let's try it out now. Let me just have the console ready just in case. Come on, come on, come on. Perfect. So the only thing it needed is for us to put it in data. Now that's complete. I think we're just about done with this, guys. I think we're just about done with this whole thing. I think it works correctly. The only thing that we need to do now is the styling. Let me just quickly run through the styling in silence. Let's run through the styling, and then once I'm done I'll get back to you guys. So finally I managed to complete the styling. Obviously you can also implement your own styling. So what I did was took the body, implemented the font family, margins, background color. The most important thing is like display flex and justifying everything to the center, aligning everything to the center, and making sure that the height is the maximum height of the screen. And then the to-do container, just gave it a border, a box shadow, just to give it a box shadow there. And then there's a border radius. The background color is basically white, and then I have the H1. I just gave it, aligned it to the center, and gave it a grayish background, or color rather. And then the input, I also gave it a display of flex, but instead of so, and then I just justified the content with space between, so that it gives it the space in between there. And then the margin at the bottom is 20 pixels to do, and the input, I just gave it a flex of 1, padding and all of that. And then the buttons, I style them differently. So the add button will be greenish, but when you hover over it, it will be a darker green. And then the to-do list, I just removed the list style and no padding. To-do items, I just spaced them between. So basically I just added space in between of the text, the two buttons. And then I aligned everything to the center. There's a small border bottom, just so the line here at the bottom. And so the span, if you remember correctly, the span is the text. So basically this text, when you have it complete, it will strike through the text, showing that it's complete. And if it's not, if you undo the complete, then it will no longer have the strike through. So basically this is what I'm implementing here. So the text decoration, if it's a span, then strike through, color and all of that. And what else? Just giving it I'm just giving the different buttons the different colors on hover and all of that. that's just about it, guys. Please do subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Just if I made mistakes, something you don't understand and want some clarification, just leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you timelessly. And thank you.